Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our May call, where we're sharing some great new updates for you here on security and compliance updates. And we've got some great guests with us today. So as always, we'll just start off with a short community welcome, and we'll get right to some great content this week. There's been a lot of really interesting announcements, and really in just the last month and a half. And so we're looking forward to bringing those to you and the opportunities that they present for partners. And so today I have with me Debraj Ghosh, and he is with Advanced Threat Protection, Threat Intelligence, and Robin Callion, and he's with Advanced Data Governance. So both of them are senior product managers in Office 365 security. And then what we'll do is hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A. We have a lot of content today, and so I will feed your questions to the presenters. And so as always, we have our community slide. So you've made it to the call, which is great. So if you've been joining us every month, you know that we also have a Yammer group that's quite active and continues to have really good growth. And so there's some great partner-to-partner interaction there, and there's folks from Microsoft on there as well, facilitating the discussion and answering your questions. And there's the aka.ms join 0365 Yammer vanity URL that will get you to that Office 365 group. And we also have some blogs. There's two different blogs. One is the US blog, all up, and then there's an enablement blog, which tends to be a little bit shorter and also have some training opportunities, which I'm going to share with you right now. And so here's the updated list for this month. And if you're not aware, or maybe you've taken these for the 346 and 347 exams for cloud productivity. So we had those for Office 365. And then now we have something very similar for Skype for Business. So these are the two Skype for Business exams that you'll need to pass for that competency. And so there's some signups right there. And the questions I'm sure will be coming is, how do I get this deck? And as always, it'll be on the Yammer group, and I will post that deck a little bit later this morning. And in fact, I tried to post it earlier today, just having a little bit of trouble uploading it, not sure why. But you will see this there, and you can get these slides and the information on the Yammer group, and I will go ahead and post the Yammer URL a little bit later as well. There's a Skype for Business Technical Airlift happening in Los Angeles. So if you're in that area and you're interested in some of that deep dive training for Skype for Business, we encourage you to check that out. And then we also have some Drumbeat Grows starting up. So Drumbeat Grow and Start and Optimize. So these are great, primarily sales-focused events which you can attend, and I encourage you to check those out as well. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn this over to our first presenter, Debraj. Thanks so much, and Raman as well. Just thanks so much for taking the time. You guys are really on the leading edge of all this, and so we're really fortunate to have you here, and thanks for sharing it with us.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone about this. So my name is Debraj Ghosh, as Mike mentioned. I'm the product marketing manager for Advanced Threat Protection, Threat Intelligence, and Exchange Online for Office 365. As with most security talks, the first thing you want to do is incite fear in your audience by showing these giant statistics of all the terrible things that can happen. Now, the point of this actually is not to instill any fear in anyone. It's basically to show you that there is this incredible scale of threats that are impacting the globe today. So 80 to 90 million cyber incidents every year. And that stat is actually from 2015, even though it says 2016. It's actually what occurred in 2015. And now, as of last year, each one of these attacks, when they are successful, costs an organization $4 million on average. So once again, it shows you that these are extensive costs. And then as a lump sum, it's about $400 billion that's costing organizations from these cyber attacks. So once again, you know, these are somewhat scary statistics, but the point of this is actually to show you that there is this incredible scale to these attacks, that they're happening all the time, they're happening very frequently, and they're happening all across the globe, and they obviously are having some serious impact on organizations. Now, at Microsoft, the way we are trying to address this issue of scale and high frequency of these attacks is to actually create something. Is to actually create something that also has the same type of scale. Um, and so essentially the way we are addressing the scale of the threat landscape is to actually have something that can take that scale and grab the signal from it so that we know exactly what's going on in the threat landscape, and then we can apply that information into all of our platforms so that we can create security services that enable us to protect our customers. And so that's what we call the Microsoft Security Graph. That's what actually captures the scale of threats, understands the entire threat landscape, obtains all of that information, and you're actually seeing some of the statistics behind the security graph. So 1 billion Windows devices that are updated every month, and whose logs are basically taken from this into the security graph. 450 billion user authentications that we have from Azure, and then 400 billion emails which are analyzed every month for spam, malware in Office. And all of this information is now part of the Microsoft Security Graph, and that information, that signal, is what we use in order to build out our services that help protect our customers. So all of our security services are tied into the Security Graph and leverage the information that's in that Security Graph. And as I mentioned, we have several different security services. So you're now looking at the stack of the advanced security stack for Office 365. That includes, of course, Exchange Online Protection, which prevents all signature-based malware, and then Advanced Threat Protection, which we'll talk about in a couple moments, which essentially helps protect organizations from all these unknown threats, so things like 0 days, ransomware, targeted phishing campaigns, or more advanced phishing campaigns. ATP will help secure against that. We also have Advanced Security Management, which enables organizations to have good visibility into how their apps are being used in the Office 365 ecosystem, as well as provides you with visibility into any anomalous behavior patterns within the organization. And by having that visibility, you can update your policies to reflect the fact that, hey, something strange was going on. Now I have the right security measures to prevent anything from happening. This is what I was showing as the advanced security stack. So I went over Exchange Online, ATP, ASM, and Threat Intel. And so we'll cover all these two, advanced threat protection and threat intel. And let's get started on ATP first. So let's talk about a little bit about what ATP does. So ATP helps protect against sophisticated threats. And right now, ATP can protect you for email workloads as well as Office Pro Plus desktop clients. So basically Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all of those. ATP will protect you from advanced threats there. And the way ATP works is there's two big parts of ATP. There's safe attachments and there's safe links. And each one of these features actually plays a role in some of this that you see. So ATP on a broad level will protect you against unknown malware viruses. It provides you with time-of-click protection, so meaning when you click on a URL, it actually examines that URL again for malicious content. And then also ATP provides rich reporting and tracing of messages. Now, as I mentioned, there are some key features to ATP. So safe links is what provides you with that time-of-click protection. URL detonation is actually a combination of safe links and safe attachments, which enables you to be protected from links in an email that are linked to files. So, for example, if you have a URL that's a .pdf, we can actually protect you when you click on that link from that malicious file if it turns out to be a malicious file. Safe attachments then also protects you against anything that has a malicious attachment. So let's go into some detail as to what Safe Attachments does. It helps protect you against zero-day exploits and email attachments, provides visibility into compromised users, and it leverages what we call a sandboxing technology. So it's essentially leveraging different sets of hypervisors. So what we're showing you here is what occurs when an email goes through the process. So these three filters at the beginning, these red three filters, and I apologize, it's a little hard to read what it says, but it's an envelope filter, then signature-based antivirus, which blocks all the known threats, and then we also have an anti-spam filter. Those three filters actually all sit as part of EOP, the basic EOP service. Then you see this safe, which is actually our cartoon image of what a detonation chamber would look like. And so in here, this is where we take the ATP piece, where we have an advanced threat. It actually then examines that attachment in the sandboxing environment to make sure that there's no malicious attachment there as well. So this last bit is really what makes it the advanced threat protection piece. Here you can actually set up your ATP policies, and in this case it's the safe attachments policy. So in the Exchange admin you can actually go and choose what kind of safe attachment policy you want, and then you can actually also set it so that you can get email notifications anytime safe attachments actually blocks a policy, or I'm sorry, blocks an email, and it can let you know. Dynamic delivery is actually a feature that sits inside safe attachments. It's actually a very cool feature. The reason why we developed dynamic delivery is that, as many of you may know, when an email attachment goes through sandboxing, there's often a latency associated with that because the actual sandboxing process takes a little bit of time. We introduced dynamic delivery, which is currently in public preview, as a way for our end users to remain productive even while that sandboxing is taking place. What dynamic delivery, if you select dynamic delivery as an option in your safe attachments policy, what it will enable is that the user can then still see the body of the email even while the attachment is being scanned. So ideally, that way they can respond, read, do whatever they would with a normal email. They just won't be able to open an attachment while it's being scanned. And if they do double click on it, they'll get this warning message that lets them know, hey, the attachment is being scanned. It'll be ready in a couple minutes if it's not malicious. Now, in order to truly remove any impact to productivity, we are also releasing a service called Document Preview in the next couple months. In that service, or in that feature, you will actually also be able to read the attachment in a preview format, so that way you actually get to see the body of the email as well as the attachment. So once again, there will no longer be any impact to productivity at all. We also provide you with safe links. Safe links is our way of providing you with time of click protection. So in this case, if an email comes in, it gets past the EOP filters once again. What we do is at the time of click, we rewrite a URL so it gets directed to one of our servers where its reputation is checked again. And if we find out that that email at the time of click, or sorry, that link at the time of click is malicious, we will block it for you. And if it is not malicious, then we will allow you to access that link. And this is essentially what you would see. This is the setup of the policy. If you turn it on and then a user actually clicks on a link in an email that we find is malicious, the end user will see this warning page. And so this is the admin where they set up the policy. This is the Safe Links window to set up policies. You can see that you can turn it on, and then you can also, once you have that turned on, you can also click this one, which allows you to also add another layer of protection, which is the URL detonation. We'll talk about that in a second. But essentially, if you have Safe Links turned on, a user who has an email that has a link in it, if they click on it, we will examine it, and if it turns out to be malicious, the user will see this warning page. Finally, URL detonation, I just sort of showed you. This actually leverages the capabilities of both safe links and safe attachments. In this case, if you can see the link here, it's a .pdf or a macro in this case. What happens here is we allow you to, once again, click on this, and at the time of click, we examine that link for malicious content. So what happens is that if it's a PDF file or a macro or some sort of file, we actually put it through a detonation chamber again, and if we find out that it's malicious at that time of click, you will once again receive this warning page. We also have provided rich reporting and tracing. This is actually the new reporting dashboard that's available in the Security and Compliance Center. You can see here that there's a variety of different ATP reports that are available. So ATP file types that have been caught, the message disposition, malware detections, top malware, and top senders and recipients. We are also releasing a new set of reporting that's coming out just this month, which is another layer of advanced reporting that's available. And in that reporting, you will actually have visibility into where in our email security stack, so where in EOP or ATP was a email flagged as malicious, and we will also then provide you with the detonation details of an email that was flagged. This is the roadmap for ATP. So ATP will be extending beyond email. As I mentioned, it's already available now for clients. We are extending it to SharePoint and OneDrive, and then eventually Skype and Windows endpoints. Actually, this is actually already available. It's Skype for Business and Yammer as well. ATP Enhanced Reporting, it provides visibility into the threats that ATP stops and why ATP viewed something as a threat. So that's the one I just described. We'll give you information into where in the stack the email was stopped. We actually have already updated these anti-phishing capabilities. We've installed a few new algorithms and machine learning algorithms that enable our anti-phishing to be a little bit better than it already was. The document preview feature that I told you about, where you can actually then preview the attachment even while the attachment is being scanned. And then a per tenant block list. This is where we can customize the block list of URLs that are of greatest concern within a tenant. Now I'm going to shift over to threat intelligence. And if you recall, I highlighted those four different security services, and one of them was threat intelligence. So threat intelligence, let's define it first. So you see on the left of the slide is a definition by Gartner. Threat intelligence is evidence-based knowledge and actionable advice and informed decisions. That's really, I actually highlighted those few terms because those are actually the things that are the most important. It's that it's the collection of real evidence that provides actionable advice so that you can make informed decisions. That's really what a good threat intelligence product should provide you with. And that's essentially what our threat intelligence does. We actually use this funnel view where at the top, this is basically all of that signal that we collect from that Microsoft security graph. That's at the top of the funnel, so that's information. And then we apply our AI and our analytics. So basically, this is where we take all that signal and remove all the noise from that signal for your tenant. And so that's where we are able to give you the insights and analysis that are specific to your tenant. And once we are able to do that, we can then provide you with the recommendations that help you update your cybersecurity policies. And the reason why this is important in terms of threat intelligence is a very key piece of security, because ultimately what it can do is eliminate this, at least even if not eliminate, it can ideally reduce that cost from cyber attacks or the losses from cyber attacks. The reason it can do that is ideally what threat intelligence should be able to do is provide you with real-time security policy updates based on the information that it collects for you and the insights that it gives you. And so the ultimate goal is to actually reduce remediation costs from a compromise. We ultimately want to reduce the incidence of compromise, and then ideally, because we can do that, it will ultimately reduce the costs to your organization from these cyber threats. And so that's really plays to this point, which is that hackers spend about 209 hours per system that they're looking at. So when you spend that much time, this is where all those sophisticated targeted threats come from. They know who to target, they know what type of attack to launch, they know when to launch it, and how often they should be attacking. And your analysts, meanwhile, are basically fairly unprepared and are reactive. So they don't know who's attacking them. They don't often know what type of attacks are happening, when will the attacker strike, and how often are the attacks occurring. So when you have a hacker who is very prepared and you have analysts who are very unprepared, obviously the scale is tipped in order for the scale is tipped for the hackers to always sort of win in that scenario. So what threat intelligence wants to do is essentially even that playing field so that analysts have all the information so that they can be prepared and actually be proactive for what's going on in the cyber threat landscape. And so ultimately the Office 365 Threat Intelligence, and I'll show you a little bit of a demo of it, it provides you with broad visibility, rich insights, and a proactive defense is ultimately its goal. So I'm going to move over to a quick demo of the product itself. The Office 365 Threat Intelligence Service can be reached through the Office 365 Security and Compliance dashboard. So here you get a look at the dashboard. From the dashboard, we want to go to Threat Management. Once we open the Threat Management node, we see several different options. The option that we want to select first is the dashboard. This dashboard provides us with a view into the Office 365 landscape. First, at the top, we see what's going on within our own tenant. So those are the daily threat detections within the tenant itself. So you can see messages scanned, threats stopped, threats that have been blocked by our advanced threat protection service, also threats that have been removed after delivery. We also provide you with a look at the malware families that are detected within the tenant, as well as the origin of where the threat is coming from. In this case, we are looking at email threats, so these are the origins of the emails that were sent into the tenant. We are also then able to provide a view into the top targeted users within the tenant. And if we scroll down on this page, we can then get a global view within Office 365 of the daily global threat detections. This is a very powerful thing to be able to show our customers because we are Microsoft. We are the only organization on the planet that can show this kind of visibility into Office 365. Obviously here, every single customer that is a customer of Microsoft is part of these statistics that we can show. And so there is no other organization that obviously has access to that network because it's the Microsoft network. So therefore, we are the only organization in the world that can actually show that level of detail into global threat detections for Office 365. Now let's look at the Threat Explorer. The Threat Explorer is where we start looking at the insights that we can provide of what's going on inside your tenant. As we open up Threat Explorer, the first thing we see here is a look at the top threat families over the course of a month. And we are looking at January 4th up to January 29th. And here we see in the legend, each one of these colors corresponds to a specific threat campaign. At the bottom, we see a pane that has the top threats within the tenant over the course of this last month. And we also highlight the top targeted users. Once again, this is very powerful information because now that we know who is being targeted, we may have a look into this user a little bit more, find out what may be causing them to be the target, and also if there's something with it about their specific policies that we can tune or update so that we can prevent them from ever being compromised because they get targeted so often. As we continue on, we see that there is a filter option in the Threat Explorer. So once again, the Threat Explorer's goal is to provide you with granular insight and information into your tenant. So having a filter option will enable us to get that granularity and that extra insight. So let's look at the filter option. We see that there is a variety of different categories that we can filter through. There's time range, the top threat family, sender domain, protection status. Now, let's initially look at the time range. What I want to do is, or actually what I did do, is I closed the pane for the Office 365 Security and Compliance dashboard so that I could expand this graph. Now let's highlight the time range that I want to look at. Let's make it obviously a shorter time range. And let's select January 20th. And then we will go to January 24th. So now, having filtered out the other dates, I am now looking from January 20th to January 24th. What I see now is obviously these the top threat families have now changed over this time period. We get to see that Win32 Ferrite is a campaign that has started to peak a little bit on the 23rd of January. We are basically now able to see a little bit more granularity into the data over this 4 days. Now, what I can also see here is that dynamically, along with this graph at the top, the two bottom graphs, or the bottom pane, has also changed. So now I'm seeing top threats over this 4-day period. And also I see that the top targeted users now has changed because now we're looking over just those 4 days. And we see now that Christy is the top targeted user over those 4 days. So that is one type of filter. There's obviously a few other options for filtering. So let's look at another filtering option. So I'm going to clear this. Now I'm back to the original screen for the threat families. Now let's look at top threat family as a filter. So if I open up the top threat family filter, let's type in Nemocod. All right, so I pull up the Nemocod threat family. Let me look at jsnemocod.tsf. And now what I see is once again the graph has changed at the top. And I am now only looking at jsnemocod.tsf. And obviously the bottom pane corresponds now to the graph at the top. So obviously top threats is now just the jsnemocod.tsf, and the top targeted user is Miriam. Now what's also interesting is now that I have this extra level of granularity, I see that there's a rise within our tenant of this Nemocod TSF campaign. Obviously at the beginning of the month, we do not see too many instances of JS Nemocod, but then over the last few days, there's been a large and substantial spike. So what I would do as an admin is probably want to learn a little bit more about it. So even though we have captured Nemocod in this form within Office 365, there are definitely variations of it. So if there's a spike in this malware family, let's look and get some more details on it. So in order for me to do that, I then come over here at Top Threats. I click on the link. And as I click on the link, I get this new pane that opens up, which gives me now far more detail and also a trace of the different messages that carried this campaign over that 1 month period. Also at the top, I see the malware family defined. What's most interesting to me here is that Nemocod itself is actually a JavaScript downloader, which then carries the actual malware. In this case, it's ransomware in its payload. And that malware or ransomware is actually what compromises my user. If I want to get more details, I click on technical details. And now I have an option to click on Nemocod or Loki. Loki happens to be the payload that Nemocod carries. So if I want to find out a little bit more about Loki, I click on Loki. And then all of a sudden I have access to this PDF white paper, which Microsoft security analysts have put together specifically for the Loki malware family. If I scroll down, I get to see that we do an extensive job of summarizing the threat. And it's not in this demo, but we actually also in these threat analyst papers break it down to the level of examples for code, where we show actual code for what Loki would look like. So very detailed information here on what the threat is, how it can impact you, what to look for. So now let's go back to the service. And now we just showed the technical details. Let's look at the global details. In my opinion, this is another very powerful piece of the threat intelligence that we can provide. What we are now looking at is the Nemocod campaign profile. And once again, the legend is missing in this case. But if there was the legend, the orange would correspond to the entire Office 365 ecosystem. The blue would correspond to your specific tenant. In this case, what we're showing is the campaign profile and the difference between the Office 365 ecosystem as well and then your tenant. What's even more impressive is that we can highlight the impacted countries for this particular campaign as well as impacted industries. Now, imagine if you are an automotive company and you see these statistics, you are not as worried maybe about Nemocod because you see that it's not really being targeted within your industry. However, if the situation were reversed and we saw that automotive was one of the #1 industries being targeted, that may cause you to be alert and notify you that you may want to take the right precautions to prevent any variation of Nemocod from impacting your tenant. All right, the last thing we want to look at here is the advanced analysis. Here we are actually breaking it down to the file-by-file examination of Nemocod and the different files that carried this campaign. So from this, you can actually download a report that basically contains all of this information. So the observed behavior, signature hits, network traffic, file names, OS, and also client versions. So a lot of this detail is covered and available. So let's close this. Now let's look at the alerts feature that's also part of Office 365 Threat Intelligence. In order for me to get there, I'm going to come back here. I'm going to open this pane again. I see alerts. I click on alerts, and I am not going to view all the alerts. I'm going to actually show you the process of creating an alert. So you can actually see here some alerts, but let's create a new alert. So I click on New Alert. I give it its name. In this case, let's call it Malware Campaign Alert. Once I give it a name, I can also provide a description for it. The category is going to be Threat Management. Obviously, there's a few different categories. In this case, we want to have alerts for our threats, so it's under the Threat Management category. We then click Next. We then see here that we can create the alert settings. So in this case, we can choose what activity would trigger the alert. In this case, we chose inbound malware delivered. We can then add other conditions as well if we choose to. And then we also add the threshold values that are required for an alert to be generated. In this case, it will require 30 activities over the last 15 minutes in order for an admin or someone else to get an alert about something odd happening. With that, I'm going to click Next. And then I can also set the recipients who will get the alerts. In this case, we have it set to the admin. We can also choose the severity level depending on how severe we think the alert would be. So in this case, it was malware or a high rate of malware coming into the tenant. So we set the severity level at high. Then we click Next again. We review all the settings. Once we have reviewed the settings, we have the option of turning the policy on, and then we'll finish. In this case, we're going to turn the policy on. Here we see an example of some of the alerts. Let's click on one to see what this would look like. We'll click on the first one, Unusual Volume of Delivered Malware Alert. So we click on it. We see that when we set the alert, the severity level of the alert, we have the details of what to do with the alert. We can also then here choose different things that we want to do. So in this case, we're choosing to resolve. We also see that this has not been resolved yet, but it's something that we are in the process of actively exploring. So we're going to close this now and then show one last powerful feature for threat intelligence. So when you look at this dashboard, what you don't see is the dashboard for threat intelligence. You actually see the dashboard for Windows Defender ATP. The reason why we have this dashboard and we're showing it is that Windows Defender ATP and Office 365 Threat Intelligence are integrated and connected. So both the systems actually are talking to each other and learning from each other. In this case, we're going to show the example of how Office 365 learns something from Windows Defender ATP, which it then learns and then implements within Office 365. So here is the Windows Defender ATP dashboard. What I'm interested in most are these machines at risk. And I see that Liz Bean has the red mark, meaning that there is something that has happened to her machine. So let's click on Liz Bean. What I see here are the activity logs for things that has happened with Liz Bean's device. One of the things that I see is that the NeuroBlaze attack has been detected on her device. So I want to learn a little bit more about that. So I click on that. And let's scroll down. So I clicked on NeuroBlaze. I have the machine timeline that's popped open, and I click down. Now, what I see is there are a list of several different things that have occurred on this device. And what I want to look at is Outlook.exe saved an attachment to disk. So it seems like there could be something that happened there where I received an email, and that email had an attachment that was saved to disk. So let me click on this and open it up. And what I see here is the path of that email and what actually occurred. And now what I do know is that Windows Defender ATP has flagged this as a threat. And since Windows Defender ATP has flagged it as a threat, it has now been known as a threat. And so Windows Defender ATP communicates the fact that this type of email or any email like this is carrying something that we have flagged as a threat. And it communicates this information to Office 365 Threat Intelligence and Office 365 ATP. And so what we can do now is we can see what has happened with this email by looking at the details in Office 365. So if I click on more details on this email in Office 365, I come back here and I'm back to the Threat Explorer page, but now specifically looking at that particular email. And I see, first of all, that Liz Bean received that email first at 1:25 and it was delivered. And so that's where we found out that Liz Bean had an attachment that landed on her device, which could be malicious. And once we've learned that in Windows Defender ATP, it communicated that information to Office 365. And in subsequent iterations of that email, at 1:35, for example, Roger and Yolanda both received it, but now, because Windows Defender ATP flagged it as a piece of malware, it is now being blocked in Office 365 as well. So that is actually the power of the Microsoft integration between Windows, Office, and the ability to communicate easily between those two platforms. So this is a very powerful feature and something that obviously no one else can offer. So now if there's any chance of something that is flagged in Windows Defender ATP, it will immediately alert Office 365, and it will also become something that Office 365 flags. And so with that, that is the entire demo for Office 365 Threat Intelligence today. And thank you for your attention, and hopefully you'll be able to go out there and talk about this product in detail with many of your customers. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Roman Cleon. I'm on the Office 365 Information Protection team alongside Debraj, and I handle our compliance solutions around e-discovery, data governance, our auditing capabilities in Office 365, which some of you may be familiar with if you are subscribing to the Management Activity API and creating your own security dashboards for customers. And then also I have the Security and Compliance Center, from which all of our security and compliance related functionality is surfaced for customers in a concise one-stop portal type of situation. So today I'm just going to walk you through quickly the advanced data governance feature capabilities that we released in Office 365 at the beginning of April. And this has been an initiative that we have been working on for about the last 2 years, I would say. We came to this from a few different angles. First, we had some archiving capabilities in Office 365. We certainly had a rich set of e-discovery capabilities. And what we saw as a trend was that customers were starting to upload, using our archiving import service, a significant amount of data into Office 365. And that was being combined with a large amount of data in the service as well. And so we went out and we did some research and surveyed our customers and took a look at the broader landscape on a worldwide basis. And what we found, which I don't think is surprising to anybody on this call, was that organizational data is growing at a significant rate. Not only is it growing, and the estimates is that organizational electronic data is doubling every 18 months, if not sooner. And so the enormity of this data combined with the complexity of the data is causing, a lot of challenges for these organizations. So if you think about the types of data that they're collecting, previously it used to be, that you had data related to Word documents or Excel or Office in general. You also had maybe, paper documents. You might have some images. You have email. Now you start getting into all sorts of other electronic means of communication, from point solution apps such as, Bloomberg chat rooms, or you've got Slack, you've got Box.net where you're storing documents, you're collaborating up there. You've got text messages, you've got IM messages. You've got all sorts of communications happening, and from a regulatory and internal compliance perspective, there's certain types of information that need to be kept for a certain period of time. And so orgs typically relied on, their end users to actually enforce governance policy, and many of them stated to us that, hey, we have a hard time actually enforcing these policies. Manually, or having end users manually classify data and then as a record, or classify data as being of a particular type, such as confidential or whatever the case may be, doesn't happen typically. You may have situations where the end user forgets to do it. They get behind, you have a churn in your organization, you don't have to train the new person. And so, they end up having gaps, and so many organizations, because they can't have gaps, they end up keeping everything. And the lack of governance opens them up to a whole host of security and compliance risks. Some of the security risks that Debraj went through with regards to sensitive data being in places where you don't know it's at. It may be exposed to third parties. It may be shared with individuals outside your organization. And so we hear a ton of different, we heard a ton of different feedback from organizations. My data is scattered across different sources. I can't apply unified policies across these various sources, which, is a significant issue for me. When I do try to enforce compliance with my end users, I don't want their productivity to be disrupted. And really, because of the fact that most of what I'm doing today is manual, I really would like something that would be automatic, right? And then finally, how do I not only protect sensitive information, but then how do I find the relevant information when I need to? And so we took this and said, okay, how do we create something within Office 365 that really delivers on our compliance vision around productivity first, have the set of capabilities be in place in Office 365, and have it really apply across a suite-wide set of applications, right? And so what we decided to do was deliver our in-place compliance solutions that allow organizations to really preserve vital data, find that relevant data when necessary, and then monitor activity through the data, monitor activity on that data so they can track and investigate actions that are taken there, and deliver all of this through our Security and Compliance Center. And so data governance was really the end product of that. And when we think about traditional data governance in organizations today, a lot of it really revolves around, journaling their data out, or preserving parts of it and sending it to a third-party archive where it's stored. And this has a number of different challenges, right? You've got increased costs. You're duplicating the data. You're sending it out of your environment to a different environment. So now you're having to maintain two separate environments. And so the risks moving from one environment to the other can be increased. The data itself is point in time. So you're not really getting, all the richness associated with a particular email. You may not have all the contact information of the people that are in the email, the calendar items, all the other emails that may be associated with that particular email or subsequently sent after that initial email was sent. And then that, of course, not having that information doesn't give you the org-wide insights that you might be able to use to leverage machine learning to really kind of drive correlations between that data. And so our Office 365 in-place data governance solution, the data stays in place in Office 365. That means that it stays in Exchange, it stays in OneDrive, it's in SharePoint. It's not moving out of those locations, and we can actually deliver data governance on that data in place in those locations, right? We don't have to make a separate file copy. We're not moving it from one place to another. The data, because it's not duplicative or duplicated, you have higher fidelity and you have lower cost, right? And the impact to end users is seamless. There's no impact to them from the perspective of if I delete something and it's under preservation policy, it's still going to get preserved. They don't have to think about it, right? And then finally, the insights around the data, because we can make correlations between different emails and SharePoint documents and IM messages and other things within Office 365, allows us to deliver a set of insights to you as the end user or as a customer that allows you to really understand what's going on with your data. What kind of policies do you have in place? How do you take those policies and make yourself more compliant? And so today, when we think about the organizational data lifecycle, really what we see is that organizations have still a significant amount of data that's outside of Office 365. and we've worked with partners as well as our own import service to bring that data in, bring it into Office 365 so that you can apply a single compliance process on that data. And then you have e-discovery in place, and then the auditing capabilities in Office 365 really allow you to monitor actions that are taken on that data from end to end. And then finally, we work with some partners on the e-discovery side when you need to export that data for review, right? And so the core capabilities of data governance in Office 365 today are, the ability to import data in. We have unified retention policies across the service, records management. We're SEC 17A-4 compliant, and all of this is delivered through the Security and Compliance Center, like I mentioned. The advanced data governance capabilities, and this preview GA Q1 2017 is off. This is actually in market today now. We have the ability now to actually deliver automatic classification, auto-classify documents based on either sensitive data types or queries that you set forth. Intelligent policies, so we make recommendations to you based on your tenant, based on the industry you're in, and that's all the information that you have given us, and so we can, based on that information, we can tell you, what sort of policies you may want to enact, and then finally take actions. And those actions in Office 365 today in data governance revolve around the capability to preserve and delete data. So with that, let's go ahead and get into a quick demo, because I know we've got 15 minutes. So this is the Security Compliance Center homepage. And here you can see some of these insights that are coming through, right? You can see that I have the ability to look at how many users are actually under a deletion policy, how many users are under retention. I have something here that says, retain tax records and create a policy around that. I'm not going to click on that right now. I'm going to walk you through sort of the core capabilities first. So let's go ahead and go into the dashboard of the Security and Compliance Center data governance piece. And so here, if I wanted to go in and say, what does my content look like over time? This tenant itself doesn't have a bunch of data in it, so it's not showing you. Typically, what you would see here is things related to, how much email you have, how many SharePoint documents you have, your content at a glance, and how big is your content, when was it created, etc. But let's go in and actually create a retention policy. And so here I can just easily come in here. I'll give it a friendly name. This will be a global policy. I'll hit next. I want to retain the content, in this case, for 7 years. That sounds good. I don't want to delete it after this time. I could actually hit delete. Or I could get even more detailed and say delete content that's older than X amount of time. Then I have the ability to either go ahead and say just apply this policy across all my documents in Exchange, public folders, groups, OneDrive, and SharePoint, or I can choose specific locations. I may want to choose specific locations if I want to have a different policy for different users within my organization. Such, for example, if I wanted to have a different policy, let's say 15-year retention for my executive staff versus 7 for my IWs, I can go in here and choose my executive staff, add those individuals to the policy, and then go ahead and keep going. I wouldn't turn on preservation lock. That's an SEC 17A4- requirement. And that really, once you turn this on, you can't actually make modifications to the policy. So all mailboxes that are associated with this policy would not be able to be changed. And then I can go ahead and create this policy. Now, if I go back and I say, great, I actually don't want to, I want to just do a policy for all my IWs, and have a different one for them, I can go ahead and not choose recipients, Again, I won't turn on preservation lock, and I'll create this policy. Now imagine I have a IW policy that's for 7 years, and I created a separate policy for my executives at 15 years. I don't have to exclude my executives from the broader IW policy because the precedent essentially would be the longer policy wins. Right, so there I have the ability to go in and create several different policies for retention, and have those set up within my environment. Next, what I'll go in and say, I actually want to have some labels that I want to publish to my end users. So here, if I have a specific record schedule within my org, and I say, I have a label that's related to confidential contracts. And go in here and create that. The label, I'll set up retention for that. I want to keep it for, 10 years. I don't want to delete it after this time. I also have the ability to go in here and use this label to classify content as a record. If I click on that box, then every time I tag a document with confidential contract, it will be classified as a record and then immutable in the service. And then I just go ahead and create this label, and that's it. Now, if I wanted to publish a label to my end users, let's say that confidential contract label I wanted to publish, I just go ahead and choose the label that I wanted to publish, add that label here. And it's not showing me that, but what it should show is like, well, it won't let me do it. What it would show here is that I have the ability to choose labels, publish those to end users, and then end users themselves, what they would see is if they go to mail, let's imagine, then what they're going to see is the ability to go in and say, I want to go ahead and tag this particular thing as a, in this case, like a marketing material for 7 years. And so it'll retain it for 7 years. And that's like a manual tagging. Now, as I mentioned before, a lot of organizations, while they want this capability, what they really want to be able to do is auto apply a label. And that's where we have the capability to go in and take a particular label. In this case, let's say it's a 10-year retention or 10-year retention label. I'm going to pick the client billing. And I'm going to say apply the content that contains sensitive information. And so in this case, if it's like credit card numbers, anytime I see a credit card number, I want to go ahead and auto apply this content. I'm going to name my policy. Choose the locations, same thing as before. I can pick specific ones, or I can choose content, OneDrive, and SharePoint. Exchange is coming, and then I go ahead and auto apply. And so it would go look for social security numbers in all those locations and basically auto tag those documents with the label client billing. Now, I also have the ability to go in and instead of choosing sensitive data types, I can go in and actually put in, anytime I see the words contract, client, billing, then I want to apply the label auto apply client, and then again pick the locations. In this case, it will actually go in and look for Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Office groups. It will look for those keywords, and then auto-apply that label to those documents that contain those keywords. And then finally, we'll go back to the data governance dashboard, and here's where we've detected tax records in your organization. And with the click of the button, I can just basically have this policy set up so that it retain this content for 21 years. This is W-2 1040 information. What we're looking for here is we use text analytics and document fingerprinting to basically understand that a W-2 looks like a W-2 in the United States. We know what those look like. We can go find those and then auto tag those documents with this policy. And so what we're doing with the advanced data governance capabilities, these intelligent capabilities where you have the ability to auto classify or use recommendations, is really taking the burden out of the end user's hands to manually classify data based on record schedules that you may have set up within your organization. And so some of the things that are coming in the future are related to really leveraging machine learning to help teach the system what certain types of documents look like, how those documents should be classified based on previous classifications, and things like that. And so that's coming, in the near future. And that's all I have today.
Thanks, Raman. Yeah, that's just going to be like the Holy Grail, right? And so That's pretty exciting to look forward to that. So we had a couple of questions, and one which you were probably expecting. Somebody's asking about, are these labels the same that are applied by the Azure Information Protection? And it's not today, right? Can you comment at all on that?
Yeah. So today, Azure Information Protection and Office 365 Data Governance, the labeling, the labels are different. And so the policy engines are different as well. If you label something as confidential in AIP, then Advanced Data Governance can't recognize that label, and therefore we can't take any action. Similarly, if we label something in Advanced Data Governance, reverse in AIP can't recognize that label. Now, the fact of the matter is that AIP, it's really about the actions and less about the label itself. So AIP, when you label something with confidential, the actions that are associated with that are restrict access or stop sharing, or encrypt the document, and they're really leveraging RMS to do that. In data governance, the actions associated with labeling or classifying a document with the label are delete or retain the document itself. Now, we are working on bringing that together. So if you have already labeled documents using AIP, in the near future, we'll be able to recognize those labels. Similarly, if you've labeled things in data governance, AIP will be able to recognize it. We're going to have one policy engine across Microsoft, and so you as an organization or as a customer, what the customer has told us is that I only want to label things once. So I label document confidential, and then I may have 4 or 5 actions associated with that label. And it could be, it's confidential, so encrypt the document, restrict access to these people, don't share, don't let it move outside of this boundary, retain for 5 years, then delete. Great. If I want those 7 actions, I only want to label it once. I have multiple policies. Now, for all of those policies to show up in your tenant, you may have to have 2 separate products, right? You may have to have AIP and data governance to have all the actions. However, you only have to label it once. So that's kind of, that's where we're at today and where we're going to, and what we want customers to know and what we want you as partners to know is that you should just use whatever system you want to label it today, and we will automatically take care of it in the future.
All right, thanks, Ram, for that explanation. And then somebody's asking, what license is required for the labels functionality? Do you know?
Yeah, so The labels themselves, when you create a label and you manually publish it to end users, where I showed you in Outlook, where you can manually tag an email, or imagine the same thing in OneDrive or SharePoint, you just need an E1 or E3 license for that. If you wanted to use the auto classify functionality, where you look for sensitive data types, or you put in keyword or phrases or keywords based on content, or look for content in Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, or groups, that is a E5 capability. The other E5 capability is the tax records, the recommended policies. That's an E5 as well. The first set of functionality I showed you around being able to have a retention policy across all your workloads, that's in E3, E1. So that's how we break it down.
Great, thanks for that. Just a comment. When the policy labels get integrated, I can envision a big problem with resolving discrepancies. But I guess that's we'll have to handle that when the time comes, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, we have across the orgs, we have probably a good 200 engineers working on the solution. So definitely, that's one of the things that they are looking at, to ensure that, and this feedback is definitely appreciated, and we've heard it multiple times. We want to ensure that if you've already labeled something and you have policies associated with that, that those get translated effectively, and that we don't cause any issues with existing policies or labels that are already in the system. Like we don't want things to either fall through the cracks, or sensitive data to be now exposed, et cetera. So definitely those are things we're looking at.
Well, great. Well, Debraj and Raman, thanks so much for your time today, and we will get this. I chatted with Debraj offline, and we're gonna work on a recording, and we will edit that in so you can see a demo of the threat intelligence, and I'll make a note on Yammer when we upload that. So thank you all for your attendance today, and thank you for the questions, and thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate you making time for the partner community.
Yeah, thanks, Michael.
All right, awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks, Debraj. Take care.